All right, we are back. Purple Daily, Zolgad, and it is time for a little bit of Purple Access brought to you by our friends at Surly Brewing Company and also, of course, TCL TVs. Enjoy more, enjoy sports with TCL TVs. And Purple Access means it's time for my buddy Chip Scoggins, Star Tribune sports columnist, to join me for our weekly Vikings discussion. And Chipper, let's just start with your column today because um, man, I don't know how this is all going to shake out. But your point about the Wilfs being confronted with the first time in a long time, basically having to make decisions for themselves about football things. What does your gut tell you about all that's transpiring as the Vikings get set to end their what has now become meaningless season on Sunday against the Bears?
Yeah, Judd, this is a spot that the Wills, I don't know that they've been in this situation before since they bought the team in 2005 because they've never hired a guy from the outside to have full control of their football operation, right? You and I talked about this the other day. Fran Foley came in to be 1/3 of the triangle, right? He had personnel, but there was Brad Childers and Rob Brzezinski that were kind of that, I don't know, a third strong or power or however they broke it up is kind of convoluted. And then when Rick came in, it was the same thing. He was over personnel, and they promoted him from inside to be the GM. So they haven't gone outside the building or the organization to find someone to give complete control of the operation to. So this is, you know, they've been the type of owners where you have the Jerry Jones that I'm running the show and I'm involved in personnel. And we've heard Ziggy and Mark over the years say, you know what, anytime you ask them about a football thing, they say, we trust Rick, we trust Zim. That's, they're the football guys and we leave that up to them. So,
Right.
well, that's not the option now. I mean, Ziggy and Mark need to be the football guys. And so I'm sure there's people that they need to lean on to know kind of the NFL landscape and like who should they be talking to, who should viable candidates are. But who are they leaning on, Judd? I don't know that question. I don't know that this is the most ideal part, but if Kevin Warren was there, I think Kevin would have been heavily involved in this situation, right? I don't know Andrew
Miller,
the new president or whatever his title is. I'm not sure that he's been in the league long enough to have that kind of background. So I'm curious to see or to know, like, who are they going to for advice and counsel on this?
Yeah, and I'd be curious to know, is that the league itself for potential GM candidates? The other and like we don't know a ton here, but the other scenario that could be unfolding too is I don't think that Rick is going to be fired. I think if Rick is going to be um not
Moved
the
upstairs.
GM,
Yeah.
that he's going to be kicked upstairs. And so, I mean, I guess the question, Chipper, has to be this: is Rick Spielman still going to be involved in advising or at least providing his 2 cents on the potential GM moves? I mean, I just don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it seems like there's, because you're talking about a complete overhaul or half overhaul, or I mean, it just seems like there's three options. I mean, I think Zimmer's done. I mean, I think everybody looks at that and say, how do you bring him back? And the post game the other night in Lambeau Field sort of felt like that was it. I mean, they're out of the playoffs, and I think that was the easy one. The notion of keeping Rick in a different role sort of bothers me, and I know they feel like he's done great work for the organization and they're loyal to him, but if you're saying to someone, we don't want you to be the GM anymore, but we want you to hang around, and if under that scenario, Judd, don't you assume they're probably going to lean on Rick for advice and counsel on who should be the next? So if that's the situation, you're saying we don't want you to be the GM, but can you help us pick the next GM?
Yeah.
Isn't that backwards? I mean,
but I mean,
doesn't make sense.
Right. But I mean, yes, it's backwards. And yes, it seems a bit dysfunctional to me. But Chip, if I was to, if we were to flat out find out that what you just said is how it's going to go down, I think we both wouldn't approve, but we wouldn't be shocked. I mean,
No, I won't be shocked.
The
No.
Wilfs love this guy. They have, I mean, I don't know if it's because what Fran was here for 4 months and it was a complete bust, and then all the stuff came out and Rick in a pinch replaced Fran, but there is definitely some type of not just respect, but almost the Wilfs being in debt to Rick that we seem to have seen before. I mean,
Yeah.
Chipper, they won what, 3 or 4 games, and Rick Spielman got promoted.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Judd, the concern I would have is what kind of dynamic would that create in that front office if the guy who did this job for, really, if you go back to 2006, that long, but let's just say 2012, so
Right.
10 years,
Yep.
is what, down the hall, and you have a complete outsider coming in that has no ties to the Minnesota Vikings, and he's trying to establish his own program, his own culture, his own philosophies and beliefs and strategy. And you have a guy who's done it for 15 years right down the hall, who and if Rick does have input and maybe a lot of input on who it is, typically in every other business, when that guy says this is who you should hire, we call him a boss, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So you don't want to have that
I agree.
gray area of is Rick my boss now? I mean, even though he's not entitled, he's the one that got me hired.
Should I ask him questions? Should I ask him for? Yeah. I agree completely. But you know what? So I think the Wilfs have done a lot of good things. Like I think they care.
Yes, yeah.
They're big fans, which is good and bad. But I think the Wilfs have done a lot of good things. So I don't want to just purposely bash them. But
no, this is not bashing him. No,
but
no.
But I don't know that I've ever thought that I think they know exactly from a football standpoint what they're doing. And I'll give you an example. We know, I think both of us independently knew and know that when Kevin Warren was basically president, Kevin Warren fancied himself a football guy and had a lot of say and like would give his 2 cents and would basically be doing probably to Rick and his staff what you're talking about Rick now potentially turning around and doing. And the Wilfs liked him. And I mean, he left to become commissioner of the Big Ten. Miller is a business guy, but I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. And look, Rick is a smart dude in some ways. And I would not be surprised if Rick has convinced the Wilfs, you know what, put me in the role that Kevin was, and I'll stay on my contract and I'll stay here. So like the discussion of what you or I would do is going to be totally opposite of what we think the Wilfs might do. But the scenario that you just played out, I could totally see. I wouldn't agree with it, but I could totally see.
Yeah. Yeah. And the Wilf thing, it's, I don't want to sound like it's hypocritical because there's part of me that likes that management style. Like if I'm a business owner, well, I'm going to put people in there I trust that run the football. And I think Mark and Ziggy have always been at like, them saying, okay, we're not football experts. Rick Spielman, Zimmer, George Payton, Robbie Z, they're the football experts. We're going to trust them to say it. And, we'll say yes or no, and we have final say on things, but we're going to take what they say is probably how it should run.
Correct.
And that's great until you come to this point where you need to know football. They need to know, like, do they even know, like, what kind of philosophy on offense that they want to have, what kind of, just how they want their football team to look, run, operate. I don't think they have that. I was thinking about this when I wrote my column. Do you remember a couple years ago? And this is kind of what spurred to, you remember a couple years ago when Twins fired Terry Ryan and we had that little round table with Jim Pohlad. And I asked him, I said, have you studied other organizations to see how they've set up their front office and how they structure things now? And Jim said, yes, I've gone through all the media guides.
Yeah, it was great.
And I remember thinking, oh my God.
This is the best comment I've ever gotten from anybody on any topic.
I couldn't
run to your computer fast. Jim, I'm done with you. Thanks.
Thank you. I don't know that they're at that level, but owners who aren't meddlesome,
right?
And the Wolves aren't. They just don't have the insight into, like, okay, who's the hot young? I don't say young. Who's the viable candidates? Who's the cutting edge, innovative, analytical
Right.
GM in waiting out there that we need to go look for.
Right.
And so you don't want them to say, you know what, we don't know that market that well. We don't know, the ins and outs of who we should be talking to. We love Rick, so let's just kick him upstairs. We know we need to have a change. Let's kick him upstairs and let it take his input on it. I could totally see that happening, and I just don't know that that's, like you said, I just wouldn't agree with that.
So for context here, and this is what, 15 years back now. So it's a long time ago, but let's take into account what you just said about how the Wilfs go about their business from the year that they hired Childress. And of course they bought the team. I think the sale was completed in June of 2005.
Yeah.
Ticey coached a year, got fired. When they hired Brad and sequestered him here and wouldn't allow him to leave, I remember talking to a source at the time, Chipper, who said the defensive hire, which was not Brad's expertise, was actually the fact that the Chicago Bears had just gone to the Super Bowl playing the Tampa 2. And Mike Tomlin, who was secondary coach in Tampa Bay, his contract had just expired. And that the Wilfs basically hunted down Tomlin. So it wasn't Brad. It was the Wilfs and that side of the operation who said, well, that's the defense that worked for the Bears in our division. This guy runs a version and knows it well. And so it wasn't Brad who said, let's hire Mike Tomlin. It was really like the Wilfs and from that side. So unless things have changed greatly, their goal is to look at what's working, especially with division opponents, and emulate that as much as possible. So that might be the answer to your question a little bit, at least, as far as how they deduct what direction they're going to go in with different hires.
Yeah, and you would think, I mean, the Fran Foley thing was a fiasco. And I don't want to say you give him a pass for it because, you hired him, but having been around the NFL in the NFL circles now for 15 years or 16, you would think that they have more knowledge and contacts and sources and a better understanding of what they want, who they should be talking to, what philosophies they that are important to them. So I would hope that they've evolved, right? But
but they're still fans.
But they're still fans, and they're still they still have this other life. I mean, Judd, in the past how many months or year, they bought an MLS team in Orlando.
Yep.
They're developing all that land, 200 acres around TCO Performance Center with put a hotel and apartments, and they're putting retail in there and their own business back in New Jersey. And so are they really investing that much time? And I don't think you could reasonably expect them to. They have all these other things going on that they're going to know the inner workings of the NFL in the way that they probably wish they did right now when they're setting out on. So if I had to lay money on it, Judd, I agree with you. I think Zimmer for sure is going to be gone. And my guess is they give Rick a new title, senior advisor or something, and they go out and find a new GM. But I still, everybody will say all the right things, but I just wonder if I'm a new guy coming in, how awkward that would be to have the guy you're succeeding be right down the hall who had done it. This is not like he had just done it a couple years. I mean, this is 15 years this guy's run the operation. And so, and will Rick be okay with stepping back in whatever capacity they want him to be in? Or is he going to still want to be involved in the day? I mean, that's the thing for me is like, I don't know his age, but is this would it be a retirement job for him?
I mean, he might say yes right now, but no, I don't think so. And I mean, the claim from the Vikings, if they went in the direction that you just said, is, well, it's going to work out perfect because this guy can bounce ideas off Rick. And I think what we're saying is that perfect? But Chip, the Vikings in some ways have always worked this way. Like we have seen, even when they're not dysfunctional, they do things that seem dysfunctional at times. And so now let me add this too, because to be clear, I agree with you. I think Mike is gone. You're right. The post game on Sunday was uncomfortable. He's certainly acting like a guy who is expecting to be fired. But let me throw a curveball at you based off something I said on Purple Daily, and I got a note back from a listener that I think is probably accurate, and it's just something to consider because Mike is acting like he's gone, but then again, with the lack of success the past 2 years, he should act like that.
Yeah.
So I said a couple days ago, I made the point that Mike almost certainly has to be fired because people are going to basically get their season ticket renewal forms and say, I'm out if Mike is not fired. I got a note back that was very intriguing. And it said, basically from a person involved from a season ticket aspect, well, your thinking is fine, except for one big problem. A lot of that stadium, especially the most expensive seats, are tied up in personal seat licenses. And those can't just be returned. I either lose the investment or you try and sell it to a person who's going to buy tickets then. But for the most part across the board right now, if you sold your PSL, you would take a bath because a person is not going to pay you your investment. And that ownership is thinking, well, we could fire Mike and that's great. But keep in mind, Chip, a lot of Mike's contract basically is guaranteed not through 2022, but 23. And that the Vikings might actually say, because it's a pandemic, because they have lost, they've definitely lost cash, we will bring in a GM, have him tolerate a year of Mike, and then move from there. I hope that doesn't happen, but that's what scares me a little bit.
Yeah, I would be, I don't know, shocked. I'd be surprised because
I agree.
It's not so much worry about people cancel tickets or that, all that. It's just like, think about the temperature around this team right now.
Agreed.
And the anger that's in its fan base. And if you came out and said,
yep,
it's not so much, we're going to lose fans and all that. It's more like, do you want to have that negativity around your organization?
No.
And so when it's just a lame duck year and that's just not a good situation. So I would be surprised at that. I don't know that you would go to a GM candidate and just say, hey, we're going to give you this very unpopular head coach who's been inflexible with the offense, whose defense is now one of the worst in the NFL for 2 years running. I mean, the evidence is there for a dismissal for Mike. And that's not to say, he's done good things here. Mm-hmm. He's been great for this organization in terms of making them relevant and competitive, where it's not just an absolute, Jacksonville situation where it's chaos. It feels like it's chaos all the time. But but it's just time for a change. And that, if I was the Wilfs, and I know they're deliberating this week, we've seen that a couple. I think you reported that too. Isn't this just the moment for a clean, fresh start and to chart a new path?
It should be. Yes.
But does that? But that's, we know they like to. I don't know if I don't know if we say they like to play it safe, but does that scare them?
Yes.
Does the unknown scare them?
100%. Yes, it does.
So that'll rein them back in from saying, you know what, we're just going to really kind of start this thing over.
Yes, and everything you just said, I agree with. I'm just saying, if you think about this from the Wilfs and a business standpoint, there are some red flags that, if you're a Vikings fan, I think should scare you a bit, including this one. We remain in a pandemic. As you articulated, and you're exactly right, these people have investments all over soccer, real estate, things that we probably don't know
well
about.
I guess the esports thing that they have like, I don't even know what those are, but somebody told me they have 3 esports teams. They have 3 of them. So I don't know if they spend a second on it, but
my point is, if you boot Rick upstairs, and so he's still going to make his salary, you hire a GM, he's going to have to be paid. You fire Mike and have to pay him, let's say 15 mil over the next 2 years, and then bring in a new coach who's not going to be cheap. I'm just saying there are some financial implications that could get in the way of them doing, from a football standpoint, what would be best. I'm totally with you. I think Mike has done a nice job, but Mike, it's done with Mike. That's just a curveball that I would be a little bit concerned about until we officially see the press conference that Mike has been relieved of his duties.
So he's owed 1 more year or 2 more years?
2 more years, 22
yeah.
and 23, and it turns out the 23 contract largely, if not also fully guaranteed.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that, but
I don't like what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah,
I'm not a fan of this.
I also fall back to the NFL Prince money. I know it's a pandemic, and I know they've lost it,
Right.
but if anybody associates the NFL ever cries poor to me, I roll my eyes because
Agreed.
you print money, you just add a 17th game, you just have to sell. I mean, and you know, you're billionaires who are developing 200 acres of land around that TCO performance. I mean, I just, the question, the next big question, Judd, is what are you going to do with the quarterback? And I'll say this, it'll be interesting to see how much input the new, and we're assuming that, Zimmer's gone, the new head coach gets. Because if I'm a coach coming in and they say, do you want Kirk Cousins or do you want a rookie? I'll take Cousins because I can win now. And that's what coaches matter to them. Unless you say, hey, we're giving you a 7-year deal, we're going to draft a rookie and you can grow with them. Coaches are always going to want to win right now and have the most competitive team that they can right now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that that'll factor in, but it's something to think about.
And these type of discussions, Chip Scoggins, will force a man to drink. And if you do drink, I think Surly Brewing, and in particular, let's see here, what's the official beer of Judd and Chip? How about Surly Furious? Chipper, I hope your fridge is stocked. Tell us about your fridge.
Judd, last night after I finished my column on the Wills, I had 2 Surly Furiouses. The box is empty. So as soon as we get off here,
You gotta get going.
I'm hitting leave studio, and I'm going to be like Fred Flintstone at the 5 o'clock.
Get in your car. You got to get Wilma. I need a Surly Furious. You can't run out of Surly Furious.
No,
not now.
That's a bad situation. Yeah.
Oh yeah, exactly. So take a page from the Scoggins playbook here, folks. Surly Furious, and all, of course, Surly Brewing products are great. On the quarterback, let me run this thought by you, because if Rick is kicked upstairs, I do think the new GM will be given the latitude to make a change there, because the problem with Cousins and the coach deciding is you can't really have him play on the last year of that, $45 million cap hit. So are you going to extend him? And I think that might be an issue. The more I play this out, I think Kirk is probably going to be traded. And how about this? The Cleveland Browns. It sounds like from the reports that we've heard on Thursday that Baker wants out of Cleveland. He and Stefanski, it's blown up. It's not going well. He's going into the last year of his rookie contract. I think it's a $19.5 million cap hit. Here's my idea, okay? And I'll preface this, Chip, by saying Baker Mayfield as the Vikings starting quarterback does not intrigue me. I don't like him that much, but I think the blueprint for this trade exists, and I think it's the Matthew Stafford trade. And to take Jared Goff, the Rams attached a second first-round pick to Goff. So it was Stafford for a first-round pick, Goff to Detroit with a first-round pick to take him. Cleveland is ideal for Kirk. Offensive line is really good. Good run game. He is a good quarterback. I don't like him personally, but who cares? I think the blueprint is the Stafford trade. And if I'm the Vikings and that trade is offered to me and I have to take 1 year of the Baker contract back, I think I have to make that trade.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, I agree with you, because it sounds like the quarterback class this year is pretty weak coming out.
Correct.
I don't know what the next year, I haven't studied it to see who would be in it, but you got to imagine there'll be, you could be in the market then. Yeah, I think if you can swing it, because I just would not be interested in an extension that keeps him here 3 more years. I just think it's
agreed.
You tried, it didn't work. He had some, he was a good quarterback, but I just think for the investment that you have to make, and even if you restructure, he's going to want what, 25 million?
Oh, he's 30? Not. Yeah. He's not
30,
taking a
32. Yeah. I mean,
30 plus.
30. Yeah. I mean, that's still just a lot of money tied up in with him knowing his strengths and his weaknesses. And so I think that would be that's going to be when you go to interview GMs, I have to imagine that's going to be the number one thing on the list, right? Like, what are we going to do about Kirk Cousins, and how do you? Because I got to imagine there's a handful of teams that would be in Pittsburgh. Would they be interested if they feel like they're right there? If they're a veteran quarterback away from being
they very well could be
legitimate.
Yep.
Obviously, Cleveland, if they're ready to get out of there. I mean, there's probably a handful. I don't know what it is that would be willing to absorb that 30 million, 28 to 32
I've got a
million.
list, Chipper. Cleveland, Denver, possibly. The Saints, possibly. Pittsburgh, Carolina, and here's an intriguing one. In fact, this is as we record this on a Thursday, which we call Reckless Speculation Thursday. How about this one? San Francisco, which needs to win now, and you call them about a trade that nets you Trey Lance back. Kyle Shanahan, I think if Kirk would take a slight haircut financially, it would be for Kyle. San Francisco is under huge pressure to win right now. Trey Lance didn't even start.
Yeah, but what did I guess without knowing what San Francisco thinks about Trey Lance, I mean, if they think, in 3 years he's going to be good, then I doubt they would do it. But if they got him
3 years, does Kyle have? I mean, Kyle, I think is going into year 5 next year.
I'm sure the coach who's on the hot seat would want the sure thing, but the GM would be like, whoa. Yeah,
I'm throwing out there that you make the call.
Yeah, well, yeah, you call anybody and everybody who might be willing to pick up the phone, and so I think that's the more likely scenario than extending him, right? Because, I just think to me. And it's easy for me to say it from my chair, and I'm not the owners, but I just feel like this is your opportunity to really turn the page. And it's not turning it on an absolute disaster where, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing that's ever happened. It's just turn the page on. They went for it, had some moderate success, didn't get the ultimate payoff that they thought they were going to get. They're in I would say, a predicament. Financial wise, with where their salary cap is and where their roster is, because I feel like their core. I feel like their core is going to get old here pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
The Harrison Smith, Kendricks.
Yes,
I mean that group. Yes. What are you going to do about Danielle Hunter? He's going to want a big deal now, and he hasn't shown he can do
that balloon payment in March, right? Like
so they have to figure that out. Yeah, they have to figure that out. So this is you're going to need a creative GM who has a plan to get out of this box that they're in that starts with the quarterback.
You're going to need a GM too who's not invested. So you need a fresh start. I mean, because I know that people bought the jerseys and they love these players, but I need an independent party to look at Harrison Smith, to look at Thielen, to look at Kendricks, to look at there's a lot of players that because this is one league, Chipper, without a shadow of a doubt. You're better cutting your losses a year too soon than 2 years too late. No question.
Bill Belichick's a genius at that. They get rid of you. How many times has he made a trade? We're like, why are they trading him? And then
they'll bring guys back for cheaper.
Yeah. I mean, they've they have perfected that philosophy. So that's you hit on it, Judge. Like, you need somebody. Would you say a fresh perspective, no ties?
Then I go audit.
Then I go back to if Spielman's there, is he going to have a voice?
I'm with you completely. And yes, my guess is yes, and yes, that's bad.
Because you're not going to just kick him upstairs and say, "Here's however much you're going to pay him. Don't worry about coming to work." You're not going to have. I mean, he's going to have some. He's going to have some duties, right? I would think.
The two things that I need, Chip, from my new GM, like the two most important things are, one, I need you to evaluate the roster without bias. That's incredibly important. And I mean, if Rick's like, but Harrison Smith, I'm like, Rick, this is not your job now. Go talk to Dunkers, go talk to whomever. I don't care. Go have lunch. And then the second thing, but the most important, and this is one area where Rick is just unfortunately fallen woefully short. Quarterbacks, the evaluation of quarterbacks. You know, Kirk Cousins happened because Rick couldn't find one. And yes, some of those things were bad luck. Some of those things were bad luck, but some of them were he has a general inability to identify the translation of college prospects to the pros. If Kellen Mond is as bad as people behind the scenes say, then that only solidifies that fact.
Yeah.
So you've got to get a GM who can evaluate the most important position in sports.
Yeah, and I'll say this: it would be hypocritical of me to criticize them for signing Cousins, because I applauded it at the time. I said, this is what they need. They're this close.
They were.
Cousins had the kind of pedigree.
Yep.
I think they underestimated his weaknesses along with their deficiencies along the offensive line. And I think the neglect that they showed along the offensive line, they probably didn't factor enough of like, okay, this guy doesn't ad lib enough. He needs a better he needs things more cleaner and almost, I don't say perfect, because that's, you know, you never can get perfect, but I think they misjudged that. But going and signing him was, to me, the right deal. It just didn't work out. Sometimes you know, you go for it. Same thing with Parisi and Suter at the Wild. I don't fault them for going to do it. It just didn't work out in the way that they thought it would. And so, but you're correct. And you know, the fact that Kellen Mond, you used a 3rd-round pick on him, and he couldn't even get on the field over Sean Mannion. And I know Green Bay is a tough place to put out there, but it's clear Zimmer thinks the kid can't play right now, you know? And so I don't think he's the long-term answer, you know? I mean, you're going to need to find a 1st-round guy or free agency, you know? I guess you could try that, a bite of that apple again.
But I mean, you find yours, develop him, and it's basically team control 5 years, and then you develop. So that's the thing. And look, Rick, I think Rick's 2 biggest blind spots now, in retrospect, are, and they're both huge, quarterbacks, like identifying. Because I mean, I'm with you. Cousins was the right guy at that time, but 1, the extension should not have taken place, and 2, you had to do that because you couldn't find one. Like you tried to trade for Bradford. The only guy that I will give him credit for as far as being the unknown is Teddy, because his leg blew up. But I think that was Norv's pick, not Rick's pick. And the Ponder pick is an all-time terrible pick. The other thing where Rick and I didn't catch on for a long time to this, but Rick compensated so much that it was a red flag. Inability to evaluate people. But he used to talk so much about, we've got all these files and we bring in all of our people and we find out everything about them. And I didn't realize that was a defense mechanism for his inability to read people. And I will give you a perfect one. Jeff Gladney. Okay.
Yeah.
1st-round pick. Jeff Gladney reportedly pulled his girlfriend by her hair while in a car and was indicted. That's not a whoopsie thing. Like, you weren't a saint until that day. There were things that should have been read in about you. And look, I know that's tough, but you're paid a lot to do that. And so those are the 2 things that I would want you're not playing fantasy football with statistics. So the 2 things I want from my GM are quarterback evaluation and a staff that can do it. That's tough. And evaluation of people. So you're not drafting players who you're going to be forced to cut as 1st-round picks because, whoops, we didn't see that coming.
Yeah, and because of that, now you're chasing to try to catch up. You're constantly turning over that secondary. I mean, Judd, and then you had 2 misses this year on Breland and Mackenzie Alexander. So, oh, by the way, now you're going to have to rebuild the secondary
and
again.
That's another great example. Yep. That's another great one.
I mean, again, and you're going to have to rebuild the defensive line again, and the offensive line you missed on the center. Yeah. Who knows what's going on with the guard, Wyatt Davis? I mean, use a 3rd-round pick on him. They basically said we got to redshirt you. I mean,
And will Mike will Mike not play them? Does the guy stink?
I don't know.
I mean, I have no clue.
It's hard to know. But I mean, the thing is with Spielman and any GM, you could play the verbal volleys where, well, he drafted this guy and he was great. And, well, this guy and this guy. I mean, nobody, everybody's going to have successes and failures, but there's just been I go back to results. In the 15 years he's been in charge of personnel, or in the 10 years as a GM, 2 playoff wins, and 1 was a miracle, right? Where the guy just missed it.
They blew it. They blew the game and came back and won. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's 2 wins in 10 years. I mean, it's what more evidence? And so, it's going to be fascinating Monday. I think it's going to be a newsy Monday, and I'm curious to see. I'm curious to see what, one, if they go the route of kicking Spielman upstairs and find a GM, who are they going to lean on? Because I just don't think you can go to Rick and say, who should we hire? I mean, who is their guy? Who is their sounding board?
Might be the league. It might be people in. I don't know. I don't know.
I just don't know
who in that building. Who in that building do you trust?
Well,
I mean, Rob's
maybe nobody, but do they have
cap guy? But he's a cap guy.
And the thing is, it's like, okay, you say, do they have owner friends? Well, would you trust another owner telling you, hey, you got to take this guy?
I think they would. I think they would.
That would be like, oh, you should hire this guy. He's great. And he turns out to be a disaster. It's like, well, he's not our problem anymore.
Fran Foley. They hired Fran Foley. And you're right. That was a complete disaster. So,
I'm curious to see kind of who they turn to help sort through, the right people to be talking to.
They should call you.
I'm not an expert on that.
You could make some. You could be like, here's what you really need: a case of Surly Furious. Ziggy, Mark, let me talk to you, guys. Surly.
We'll get some beers. We'll talk this out.
Let's do this right. Let's do some good pours. All right, Chipper. Thanks much, and talk to you soon. And I guess the next time that we talk, we will probably be talking about some changes. We just don't know which ones.
Big changes. Thanks, brother.
Talk to you. Bye.